I still remember that day clearly, the day I realized that I would never belong to this family. I was only 30 years old at the time, but it felt like I had lived my whole life in the darkness, never able to escape. Stepping into my family's big house in Los Angeles, I felt a difference. Although the walls were still cold and the house was still as gorgeous as ever, everything in my heart had changed. My business trip lasted 3 weeks, and I was looking forward to coming back and surprising my family, especially my father, George Jennings, a man who always sees himself as the center of the universe. He is always proud of his so-called success, of the fortune he has worked so hard to build. But I know for him, success is never enough. If I were not Lucas, the son he loved, I could never be recognized. But today, I will change all that. That family dinner was not at all what I had imagined. Instead of a warm welcome, I was met with a heavy silence as I entered the dining room. My father sat there, in his usual place, where all family decisions were made. My mother sat beside him, as usual, her eyes indifferent, and without a word of encouragement. But today, there was something different. Lucas, my younger brother, sat across from me, his face filled with smugness, as if he had won a great victory in life. But it's all just appearances. As soon as I sat down, my father didn't give me a chance to speak. He began immediately, his voice sharp as a razor, every word stabbing straight into my heart. "Emma, you are a disgrace to this family, a failure," he said, his eyes devoid of sympathy. "Lucas is the child I am proud of." Every word in that sentence, like arrows piercing through my body, made me feel suffocated. Lucas just smiled slightly, the smile of someone who had achieved what he wanted, without having to try too hard. My younger brother, who was always pampered and cared for by his parents, never had to endure what I had to face. As for me, I was never considered a real child in their eyes. I looked around the room, feeling like the eyes of the guests, the family business partners, and the relatives were all scrutinizing and judging me. They didn't say it, but I could feel the pity and contempt in their eyes. I was used to that feeling, but today was different. It was really painful. But I won't let them see me fall. Just as I was about to speak, Grandfather, the only person I trusted in this family, slowly stood up. The room became silent immediately. He was the only person in my family that I felt any real respect for, not because he was my grandfather, but because he was the only person in my family who could see my true worth. George, my father, turned to my grandfather with an annoyed look. "Dad, sit down. You don't need to defend him. He chose that path himself. He could have lived a comfortable life like Lucas, but instead chose that crappy job, living in a shabby, poor apartment." My mother sighed, shaking her head as if I was her biggest disappointment. Her eyes never left me, but there was no love in them, only weariness and disappointment. Grandfather did not answer immediately, but only looked at my father with cold eyes. He put his hands on the table and said, his voice low but determined, "It's time for people to know the truth." The room was silent. Everyone turned to look at him. I felt my heart pounding, wondering what he was going to say. Grandfather looked at me. His eyes seemed to want to convey some determination to me. "What truth, sir?" my father sneered. "Is that a disgrace? Everyone knows that." Grandfather was not angry, but just looked at my father with eyes full of disappointment. "You have been blind for too long, Nathan." He turned to me, his eyes gentle but determined. "Emma, you are the only one in this family that I truly respect. Not because you are my daughter, but because you have done what none of us dare to do. You have built an empire on your own without anyone's help." His words were like a slap in the face, and I choked up. What he said was true. For years I had tried my best to achieve success without the help of my family, but when he said that, I truly realized I was not a failure, not in his eyes. The room went silent. Everyone's eyes were on me. Lucas looked like he was going crazy because he couldn't accept this fact. Then George stood still, mouth tightly closed. I looked at my father, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was no longer the abandoned daughter. The dining room remained silent after my grandfather's words, but the atmosphere was far from light. No one, whether guests or family members, said a word. My mother sat silently, her eyes glazed over, as if everything that had just happened was a nightmare from which she did not dare to wake up. My father sat there, his face like a stone slab, showing no emotion other than rising resentment. Lucas, the son that everyone in my family had always thought was perfect, now sat silently, eyes wide open, barely able to hide his anger. My brother, all these years, had been cherished by my father like a treasure. But today, he was faced with the undeniable truth. He was nothing but a hypocrite, with nothing but family privileges, protected by his father all his life. I looked at them, each one of them, and I realized they never saw me, never saw the struggle and pain I had gone through to get to where I was today. I had lived my whole life in the shadow of indifference and contempt, and now I was not going to let that happen again. At this point, my grandfather turned to look at me, his eyes both stern and understanding. He was the only person in my family who had never been too harsh on me. For the first time in my life, I felt genuine respect from someone in my family, and I was determined not to let this be the only thing. He looked at me, his eyes as sharp as they had been when he spoke those powerful words. "Emma, you did what no one else in this family has dared to do," he said, his voice low but powerful. "You built your company from scratch while they relied on privilege to get what they wanted. You deserve recognition." At that moment, I felt like a different person. Not the daughter of a powerful father, not the child who was always compared to her spoiled younger brother. I am Emma Jennings, an independent, strong woman capable of doing things my father could not imagine. When my grandfather said that, I didn't know how to thank him. He was the only person in this family who saw me as I truly was. But the feeling of satisfaction in my heart, hearing my father being ridiculed, was not simple revenge. It was liberation. This feeling was like a wave that washed away all the feelings of shame and fear that I had carried for so many years. "George, you think you're the only one who has the right to decide in this family?" My grandfather turned to my father, his eyes no longer filled with the usual concession, but with anger and disappointment that couldn't be hidden. "You forget that this family is a community, and respect doesn't come from power or money, but from what you can actually do." My father glared at him, then bowed his head, seemingly at a loss for words. My mother looked at me, her gaze no longer cold as usual. Perhaps she was seeing something in me that she had never understood. But there was still doubt in her eyes, as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. "Grandpa, what are you talking about?" Lucas spoke up, breaking the silence. "She can't do anything. She just relies on you for these things." I didn't answer Lucas, just looked at him with a hard gaze. I was no longer the little sister who had to endure these insults. I was the master of my own life, not needing the approval of anyone in this family. And then, as if everything were falling apart, my father stood up abruptly, his hands shaking. "It can't be," he gasped, his voice low as if something were stuck in his throat. What did you do?" He turned to his grandfather, his eyes blazing with anger. Grandfather was unfazed. "What you don't see is the truth," he said, his voice as cold as the winter wind. "Emma has done things you could never do, Nathan." I felt waves rolling inside me, a strange feeling of joy and anger. It was the same feeling I had carried for years, the constant struggle to prove my worth. But today, it all ended. Today, I would stand up and not let anyone in this family walk all over me again. I turned to my grandfather, my eyes firm. "You were right. I built everything from nothing, but they never acknowledged me. You never saw my worth, but today you changed everything." Grandpa smiled, proud. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear from you." When he finished speaking, the room was still silent. All eyes were still on me, but this time I no longer felt afraid or ashamed. I had risen, and I was no longer the person I had been. Lucas said, his voice filled with indignation, but before he could finish his sentence, I spoke up, not giving him the chance to weaken me. "Don't say anything, Lucas," I interrupted, my voice firm. "You can't understand because you never had to fight for what you have." We sat in silence, looking at each other. The rest of my family, some still didn't believe me, some still doubted me, but we all knew one thing: I had won. When my grandfather spoke, the dining room became strangely quiet, as if no sound could break this tense moment. My father could not hide his anger, but he could not deny that he was in quite a shock. Lucas, even though he was always proud of himself, now he couldn't hide the worry in his eyes. I know, my brother always thought that he was the only one who could achieve what my family wanted, but now he had to face the truth, a truth that he had never expected. I sat there, my hands on the table, my eyes fixed on my grandfather. A confidence I had never had before now filled me. Despite all the years I had spent being treated as an invisible person in my own family, today I felt stronger than ever. My grandfather, the only person in this family who never doubted me, was the one who helped me find my true self. He looked at me, his eyes sharp and determined, and I felt every word he spoke, like a declaration of war against my entire family. "Emma," he said, his voice steady, "you are the only one in this family I truly respect, not because you are my daughter, but because you have done what no one else in this family has been able to do. You have built your own career, without anyone, without relying on this family." As he said those words, I could feel my heart pounding. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was no longer the abandoned child. I was no longer the shadow of Lucas, no longer had to endure my father's disparagement. And I'm determined not to let this end in silence. My father looked at my grandfather, his eyes filled with unconcealed anger. "What can you do when your daughter can only rely on you to get what she wants?" My father said, his voice filled with contempt. "My daughter is a failure. Do you think I can stand by and watch?" My father's words, to me, were like knives stabbing my heart, but instead of feeling pain, I felt like I was standing on a peak where I could see the truth clearly. Lucas, who was always pampered by her father, is now just someone trying to hold on to a power she never deserved. "You're right," I stood up, my voice no longer shaking. "I have done things my father and brother never could. I don't need to rely on anyone in this family for my success. And tonight, all of you will have to look at yourselves." Lucas, her face contorted, she jumped up from her chair. "What? What are you talking about?" she said, her voice indignant. "You can't do anything, just relying on Grandpa. There's nothing to be proud of." But I didn't answer. I just looked at her, and I knew in her eyes there was fear that she had never felt before. Never had she had to face the truth that I was the one who deserved it, not her. Grandpa turned back, his cold eyes looking at me like a guiding light. "Emma, you did what they never did, and today all you have to do is reaffirm it. Everyone in this family has forgotten that respect doesn't come from money or power, but from what you can truly create with your own abilities." I no longer feel afraid. Over the years, my father has told me that I will never be worthy, but today, I am no longer the daughter who bows to his expectations. I stand up, look at everyone around me, especially my father, who always considered me a failure. "I did something you never thought I would," I continued. "I built a company from scratch, without the help of my family, without the support of the relationships you made, just me and my own hard work." My mother looked at me, her eyes wide, as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. She didn't say anything, just looked at me silently, as if she was searching for something in me that she had never seen before. I could see the shock in her eyes, but I didn't need her approval anymore. She had never protected me. She had always stood by Dad and Lucas. But today, I was no longer the pitiful daughter she had seen. I was a strong, empowered woman, capable of making my own decisions. Lucas couldn't take it anymore. "You can't overthrow us," she shouted, her voice full of anger. "Who do you think you are?" I stepped closer to Lucas, without fear. "You are just a shell of your father," I said, my voice sharp, like a knife stabbing straight into her heart. "You have nothing but family privilege, and you will never understand what I have done to get what I deserve." George, my father, was now in a complete dilemma. He stood there, unable to refute my words, because he himself realized that I had done things that he could not imagine. But in his eyes, I was still an unworthy daughter. Grandpa stood up and walked towards me, his hand on my shoulder as if in encouragement. "Emma, you won. Now let them all see it." When my grandfather finished speaking, I felt like the whole world belonged to me. I stood at the highest place I had ever dreamed of, where all my family members, who had once considered me useless, now had to face the truth. After that dinner, everything seemed to change forever. The truth my grandfather exposed not only helped me reassert myself in the family, but also opened a new door. I no longer felt like an invisible child, living in the shadow of my father and younger brother. I realized that I did not need their approval to succeed, and I decided that I would never go back to a family that only saw my failures, instead of seeing the efforts and achievements I had built. After that day, I decided to leave the house that I had called home for many years, not because I didn't love my family, but because I needed to find my own path, a path that was not governed by the expectations and contempt of the people I loved. I rented a small apartment in St. Monica, where I have a private, quiet space where I can focus on work. For the first time in my life, I felt free. No longer living under the shadow of a powerful father, no longer having to see the contemptuous eyes of Lucas. No one is asking me to prove my worth anymore, because I have proven to myself that I am worthy. And that gives me a peace I have never felt before. But the road was not easy. I was starting from scratch, even though I had connections and experience in the industry. I remember the early days when I decided to start my own company, Jennings Media, a small media company that I planned to change the way the industry worked. But no one thought I could do it. I got negative comments from people in the industry, investors who didn't believe in my abilities, and even people in my family who looked down on me. They never thought I could succeed without relying on family power. Throughout that process, I had only one person supporting me, who was always the only light in my life: Grandfather. He stood by me, not because he was my grandfather, but because he believed that I could do what he wanted me to do. Whenever I felt discouraged, he was the one who reminded me of the importance of independence and true worth. I clearly remember a call with him when I was having trouble finding investment for the company. "Emma, where have you been?" he asked, his voice low but full of encouragement. "I don't know, sir," I replied, my voice dropping a little. "Everyone in the industry looks at me like I'm a joke. I don't know if I can continue." He was silent for a moment, as if thinking about something very important. Then he said, "You never have to prove anything to anyone. Remember, no one can judge your worth except yourself. Don't let anyone make you doubt yourself. You have developed the most important things anyone can need: perseverance and the ability to stand up for yourself." His words helped me regain my determination. I no longer felt alone in this journey, because I knew I wasn't doing it alone. I had my grandfather by my side, who believed in me, even when my family didn't. After months of effort, Jennings Media finally started to make progress. I got my first contract with a small startup that wanted to enter the media market, and that was the first big break in my career. It wasn't a big contract, but it was worth a lot to me. Not because of the money, but because it proved that I could stand on my own and build something of value. Although my company is still small, I have started to get attention from potential investors and partners. Lucas and my father still don't believe in me, still think I'm just a failure trying to hold on to a pipe dream. But that doesn't matter anymore. Those who don't believe in me will never be the motivation for me to continue. I have found the strength within myself to continue on this path, and I will not stop. I remember one time when I attended a meeting with a group of big investors. They underestimated me because I had no experience in running a big company. I can't forget their skeptical looks when I presented my company's development plan. But I didn't back down. I convinced them with the numbers, the detailed plans that I had carefully studied during the past time. Finally, they agreed to invest a large sum of money in my company. That was the first important step on the way to building the empire that I dreamed of. I learned a lot during those difficult months, but more importantly, I learned how to take control of my own life. No one else could decide who I was anymore. I could define myself. My company grew every day. I started hiring employees, expanding, and started getting contracts from big partners. I felt like I was on the right track, and I believed that I could do things that I had only dreamed of before. I remember those late nights, sitting alone in my office, rereading the plans and contracts I had signed. Every time I saw my achievements, I felt stronger. But not just because of these successes, but because I had overcome myself, overcome all difficulties, all criticism, to get to where I am today. When I look back at everything I have been through, I cannot help but feel proud of myself. But I know that all my achievements are not enough. I not only want to prove to my family that I can succeed, but I also want to push them to a point where they can no longer deny the truth. I will not only win at work, but I will also have to take power back from them. My family, especially my father, George Jennings, always believe that power and wealth can protect them from all storms. They think they can continue to live in the shadow of their old success without having to do anything. This is the company that this whole family built, but you let it collapse because of your complacency and ignorance. My words were like knives stabbing into her heart. Not only did I criticize her for her incompetence, but I also exposed her arrogance and pride to those who could not see the obvious mistakes she had made. My father was silent throughout the meeting, but I could feel the anger in his eyes. He couldn't handle the truth that I was exposing in front of everyone. In my heart, I felt an indescribable joy. He had called me a failure, never believing in my abilities. Now, here I was, not only proving that I could succeed, but also helping to save the company that he had once placed his trust in my brother. Now I could clearly see the change in the eyes of the shareholders. They began to pay attention to me, not just as a daughter of a powerful family, but as a real businesswoman, capable of leading and guiding. They saw in me a determination and intelligence that they had never thought existed before. I noticed a change in the atmosphere of the meeting. Those who had previously ignored me now could not help but listen to what I had to say. When I finished my presentation, the room fell silent for a moment. Lucas, still standing there, face red, stiff with shame, my father now no longer able to maintain his pride. He could not refute what I had pointed out. I looked straight at him, my voice calm but full of authority. "You were wrong, Dad. And now I will make things right from the beginning." One of the major shareholders, whom I had met earlier, stood up and said, "We have reviewed the documents and the points you have raised. We feel that restructuring the company is the right move, and we support you in taking control of the company from now on." The eyes of my father were dark. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. I could see the despair in his eyes, but I didn't feel guilty. It was he who had pushed me into this world, a world where I had to fight for myself. Lucas still wouldn't let go. "No way," she shouted. "You won't let her be CEO. This is my father's company." I stood up, my voice calm but firm. "No, Lucas, this is all of our company, but I am the one who can save it. And I will, right now. I don't want to hurt my family, but sometimes the truth is the only thing that can free you from the bonds that have held you so tight for so many years." I was the rejected daughter, always living in my brother's shadow, but today, I am victorious. I have overcome all barriers and taken back the power that I deserve. After the meeting ended, I received strong support from shareholders. Things started to change rapidly. Lucas and my father were removed from the board of directors, no longer having any power in the company. I had completely taken control, and from here, I could put the company on the right track. My first steps as CEO were not easy. The company was not a ship that could be turned around immediately after being on the wrong track for so long. I had to change the entire way the company operated, and that required not only determination, but also courage. I faced challenges that no one in my family thought I could handle. On my first day as CEO, I walked into an office I never thought I would be sitting in. Everyone in the company looked at me with surprised eyes, but I did not allow myself to be weak. I had enough confidence to affirm that I would get this company back on the right path. I started restructuring the company, changing the way we work, pushing new marketing and partnership strategies. The company slowly started to recover, but I knew this was just the beginning. What I feel most satisfied with is the respect I receive from my employees and partners. They no longer see me as an extra in this family, but as a real leader. The feeling of being recognized is something I never had before, and now I no longer have to rely on the approval of my father or Lucas again. Even though I had regained control of the company, I couldn't avoid facing my family. My father still couldn't accept failure. He couldn't bear the thought of his daughter, whom he had once called a failure, now being in control of the company he had worked so hard to build. I no longer feel regret or guilt. I know I did the right thing. Lucas still can't accept this change. He still believes that this company belongs to him and never wants to accept that he has been replaced. But I don't need to care about their thoughts anymore. The first day I walked into the CEO's office, Jennings Media, a strong feeling came over me. It was not just a corporate restructuring, but a battle that had been planned for a long time. This battle was not only about maintaining control of the company, but also about asserting that I, Emma Jennings, not an abandoned daughter, not someone who only knows how to rely on her family, but someone who is capable of standing on her own, changing everything on her own. When I sat down in the chair my father sat, I felt a cold air pass through me. Not because I was afraid, but because this was an important moment, a moment that I had fought tirelessly to get. I had gone from nothing, from being looked down upon. Now I sat here as a winner. The people in my family, especially my father and Lucas, never believed I could do it. But now I have proven to everyone that I can do it. Strained family relationships. Even though I had control of the company, I knew that my father and Lucas would never give up easily. My family members cannot bear the fact that I have replaced them, especially Lucas, who was always pampered by my father, always favored, and never suffered any betrayal in life. But now he had to face the truth. I was not the failure he thought I was. The day after I officially took over the company, my father and Lucas came to the office to confront them. In front of me, they still tried to keep a straight face, but I could feel the worry in their eyes. Lucas stood in front of my desk, his face sullen and angry. "Do you think you won?" Lucas roared. "You have no right here. This is my father's company and you cannot take it away." I smiled, a soft smile without any confusion. "Lucas, you don't understand. This isn't your father's company. This is our family company, and you're ruining it. I'm the only one capable of saving it." My words were like a slap in the face. "Lucas, He couldn't deal with the truth I was speaking. Every word I uttered was like an undeniable declaration of war. He couldn't find any arguments to counter. My father, still keeping his composure. But I knew that he could not escape the feeling of failure. Ever since I started making decisions about the company, he had begun to worry. I knew that he could not accept being replaced, overthrown by the very daughter he had abandoned for so long. He looked at me with eyes full of disappointment, but in those eyes, I also saw a bit of respect, something that I had never received from him before. "What did you do?" he said, his voice breaking. "Do you think you can run this company? You don't have enough experience." I raised my head and looked straight at him. Experience isn't the most important thing. I've proven that I can do better than those who have nothing but privilege. This company needs good decisions, not your blind protection of Lucas. My father said nothing more, just looked at me silently. He couldn't refute what I had said, but I knew he would never accept this. He wouldn't be able to bear to see himself replaced by his own daughter. Even though I regained control of the company, I cannot deny that my relationship with my family has been pushed to the limit. It is unacceptable to be removed from a leadership position, and my father, even though he didn't say it, I knew he was feeling a deep sense of failure. They couldn't see that I had done everything for the company, for the future of this family. But to them, I was still an unworthy daughter, someone they would never consider a part of the family. One evening, as I was sitting in my office, looking out the window, I received a call. It was from my grandfather. "Emma, Dad, and Lucas came to the office. They want to meet with the board to reclaim control," he said, his voice full of concern. "They won't give up easily. You have to be prepared." I wasn't surprised. I knew they wouldn't give up that easily. But this time, I was prepared. Not because I was angry or wanted revenge, but because I knew that if I didn't stand my ground, the company wouldn't be able to move forward. The next morning, my father and Lucas showed up at my office again, along with some of their allies from within the company. They demanded that I return control, claiming that I did not have the experience to run this company. This time, I didn't give them a chance to say anything more. "I don't need your approval anymore," I said, my voice confident and determined. "This company will continue to move in the right direction, and I will be the one to lead it." This confrontation lasted for several hours. Lucas and my father refused to give up, trying to use all their connections in the company to oppose my decision, but all they did was make me more determined. I don't need their approval. I stood up for myself, and I will continue to do so until this company is truly saved. Finally, Lucas and my father had to leave the office, but they did not stop. I knew they would continue to find ways to fight me. But I was no longer afraid. I had done things they never believed I could do. The next day, when I woke up and looked out the window, the city of Los Angeles was still calm, but inside me there was a wave rising. I had come through a lot to be able to stand here, and today I was about to witness a transfer of power that could not be reversed. The company that my father, George Jennings, which I have worked hard to build over the years, now belongs to me, not thanks to family privilege or anyone's help, but thanks to my own efforts, relentless perseverance and determination to overcome all challenges. But I knew that taking control of the company was not the end. It was only the first step. I didn't want to just sit in the CEO's chair and run the company. I wanted to take the company to the next level, to make it stronger and more resilient than ever, not based on the past, but on good decisions and strong leadership. Today, I decided to take the first important step. I called an emergency meeting with all the key employees in the company. I have a comprehensive restructuring strategy to get the company back on track, and I want everyone in the company to understand that this is not a temporary change, but a long-term decision. The company will not return to the mistakes of the past. The meeting began. I walked into the room where the senior staff were waiting. These were people I had hired, people who had been with me through the tough times. They were people who believed in me even when my family said no, and I couldn't let them down. I felt a strong connection with them, as if we were all working towards the same goal. I started the meeting with absolute confidence. We are at a turning point. I'm not here today just to announce changes to the company. I'm here to create a new future for all of us, I said, my voice calm but strong. The people in the room started to pay attention. They knew that what I said today would not be just empty promises. This was a real decision, a bold move. I wanted them to see that I didn't just want to change the company's appearance. I wanted to change deeply from the inside, rebuilding a company that everyone could be proud of. We will restructure the entire system of operations, I continued. Every department, every project, will face a serious review. I will not allow any more mistakes. Lucas and my father let this company go into crisis, and I'm not going to let that happen again. The employees in the room didn't say anything, but I could see the agreement in their eyes. They understood that I was talking about a company that was not just a family business, but a company of all of us. I wanted them to feel that they had an important role in this company, and that they would not be forgotten like I had been. As I began to restructure the company, my father and Lucas couldn't stand it. They couldn't accept this change, and they decided to take it to court. They didn't want to lose control of the company they had built, and they believed they could regain power if they kept fighting. But I knew that this was the moment when I had to face them. Not just in a family fight, but in a legal battle. I clearly remember the first time my father and Lucas. They took me to court. They claimed that I had illegally taken control of the company, and they asked the court to reverse the changes I had made. I knew they wouldn't give up easily, but I was prepared for this fight. I had a top-notch legal team, and they worked tirelessly to prepare for the trial. I couldn't let my family ruin everything again. This was my time to fight at all costs. The company was not just my father's property. It is also my brainchild, the career that I have worked hard to build. In court, Lucas and my father tried to present evidence to prove that I had overthrown them and illegally taken control. But I had solid evidence to refute all their accusations. My lawyers proved that I had the right to act as I did, that I was not only a legal shareholder, but also a person with a legitimate interest in the company. I clearly remember the trial ending, when the court ruled in my favor. My father and Lucas could not retain power in the company. Both of them were stunned when they heard the verdict. This was not only my victory in the legal battle, but also the victory of the truth. I had won, not only in my job, but also in the battle for my own honor and power. After the trial ended, I returned to the company, but I knew the fight was not over. Even though I had won, I still had to face the consequences of this decision. My father and Lucas can't accept defeat. They come back to the company with an arrogant attitude, as if they still have control over everything. But now, they have nothing. A week after I took control of the company, I held an emergency meeting to inform the entire staff of the changes that were coming. That's when I officially announced that both my father and Lucas will no longer hold any power in the company. Control of the company is completely mine. This company will take a new path, no longer dominated by the mistakes of the past, I said at the meeting. George Jennings and Lucas were not able to sustain this company. Now I will be the leader, and I will make sure that the company will thrive. For the first time in my life, I saw my father and Lucas lost all confidence. They were no longer leaders, but now failures who could not maintain what they had built. My father just stood there, unable to say anything, and Lucas blushed with shame. But I didn't feel sorry for them at all. They had so many chances to do the right thing, but they didn't. By regaining control of the company, I not only felt like I had completely turned my life around, But I also felt like I had achieved something that my family, especially my father and Lucas, never imagined. But deep down, I knew that I had not only won the battle for leadership, but that I was also winning a bigger victory, a true personal victory. This was no longer about the company, but about the respect and freedom I had craved for so many years. Since the day I took over Jennings Media, the company started to change day by day. The employees trusted me. They saw me not only as a leader, but also as a person with a clear vision and clear goals. I did everything from scratch, and now I was able to lead the company through the mistakes of the past, from there, growing stronger than ever. But that was just part of my big plan. While the company was growing strongly, I couldn't help but think of my family, the people who had always considered me a loser. My father and Lucas, who had hurt me so many times, now suffered a terrible sense of defeat. I had not only taken power back from them, but I had also made them realize that nothing could bring me down. I still remember that day when I received a call from my grandfather. He was the only person in the family who believed in me and stood by me from the beginning. After I regained control of the company, he called me to congratulate me, but he also reminded me, "You may have won this battle, but what do you have to do next to maintain that victory?" At the time, I didn't respond immediately, but looking back, I realized something important. This victory is not the end. It is just the first step in the journey to assert myself and restore what I deserve. I want to not only be the one running the company, but also the one shaping the future of this family. Even though I had gained control of the company, I knew in my heart that a part of me was still not completely free from the wounds of the past. My father and Lucas, there are still people who can't accept that I've surpassed them, and I can't let go of all the hurt I've endured over the years. So I decided that my revenge would not be just about power or money. I would make them realize that they were wrong to look down on me, to push me aside because I did not follow the path they wanted. And I would do it in a sharp way, without leaving a trace. I started planning. First, I focused on Lucas, whom I have always considered the only one in my family who can replace me in my father's eyes. Although my younger brother has always been favored and supported, I know that he has no real ability. That is why my father always has to protect him in every situation. But now, I will make him realize that the company cannot survive just by relying on the favor of the family. I dig deeper into the contracts and projects that Lucas signed during his time as head of major projects in the company. I discovered that one of the major projects Lucas pushed forward in a way that was not feasible. She used her family's reputation to sign contracts without any clear strategy, leading to many serious failures. I decided to make these mistakes public. I knew that if Lucas continued protection, the company would not be able to develop steadily. I began to collect evidence, working with financial experts and lawyers to prepare for a strategic attack on him. This is not because I want to destroy my brother, but because I want to prove that a family that always covers up mistakes will only lead to ruin. One of the things I did was hold an emergency meeting with shareholders, where I publicly disclosed information about failed projects that Lucas signed. Although I knew that I would face strong opposition from my father and Lucas, but I'm not afraid anymore. This is the time for me to show them that I'm capable of running the company, and I won't let past mistakes drag the company down anymore. As the meeting took place, I stood before the shareholders, with my father and Lucas sitting right back, unable to argue. I began to present the failed investments they had made, as well as the bad decisions they had made. Lucas have been given over time. I have presented clear evidence, not only of the financial, but also of my brother's lack of strategic vision. These projects not only failed financially, but also reflected a lack of understanding in the management of Lucas. I said, my voice calm but firm. We cannot continue to build the company on this weak foundation. If we are to move forward, we must make profound changes from within. He said nothing. She sat silently, her face red with embarrassment. My father, although he tried to keep his composure, I could see the disappointment in his eyes. Finally, he spoke, but his voice no longer had the confidence it had before. You're right, my father said, but did not look at me. I was wrong. Everything seemed to slow down at that moment. No one said anything else, and I could feel the change in the atmosphere. I was no longer the failed daughter they thought I was. I was the real leader of this company. After that meeting, I not only regained leadership of the company, but also restructured the entire working system. Lucas and my father were completely removed from the company, no longer having any power. Lucas, not only did she lose control of the company, but she also had to face the failures she had caused. My father can no longer work at the company because he no longer has enough prestige to run it. The company now belongs entirely to me, and I will take it further. But the important thing is not that I got the company back, but that I won my own fight. I no longer feel guilty or doubtful. The days of living under the rejection of my family are over. I have found my own path, and now I will continue on that path. No one can stop me. Since the day I officially took control of Jennings Media, my life has changed forever. But the deeper I got into the work, the more I realized that the victories were only temporary. The days of being looked down upon by my family, the pain I had endured, were now in the past. However, I couldn't help but feel that something was still unfinished. With my leadership, Jennings Media has grown, expanded, and attracted many strategic partners. I have rebuilt the company from the past mistakes and taken it further, surpassing all expectations. However, deep down, I know that I have not completely freed myself from the shadow of my family. Lucas and my father never gave up. Even though they were removed from the company, the hatred in them has not subsided. They can leave the company, but in my heart I know they will never accept this change. And I, not because I want revenge, but because I need to feel completely free, no longer bound by what has passed. One evening, while I was in the office, I got a call from my mother. All these years, she was never really on my side. She always stood by my father and Lucas, even considered me as someone who brought shame to the family. But today, when I heard her voice on the phone, I knew something was changing. "Emma, I want to talk to you," she said, her voice softer than ever. I hesitated for a moment, then replied, "What do you mean? Do you want to criticize me again?" My mother was silent for a moment, then continued, "No, honey. I just want to say that I understand that things have changed. I don't know what you've been through, but I understand that you've done things that we couldn't do." These words stunned me. I did not expect them from her. My mother had always stood by my father and Lucas, and now she says she understands me. This is not forgiveness, but a change that I cannot help but acknowledge. "I don't need your approval anymore," I said, but my voice wasn't as firm as before. "I've come this far without anyone's approval, but thank you for your words." The call ended with silence between us. I can't explain how I felt. I wasn't the child she had hoped for, but now I could feel a little bit of acceptance from her, even if it wasn't complete. And that was what I needed. When I returned to work, every day was a completely different world. I was not only running a company, I was becoming a real leader. But this change was not only in my work, but also in my personal life. I have learned not to depend on anyone else for approval. For years, I felt like a shadow in my family, someone who was never taken seriously. Now I am no longer that shadow. I have built a solid career for myself and am ready to move on. But I knew that the change in the company was only part of it. What did I need to do next to truly free myself from the constraints of family, from the expectations I had never been able to meet. I had never felt truly free until now. Although I had achieved everything I wanted in my career, true freedom was something I had yet to find. As I was growing the company, I realized that in order to truly be free, I needed to take a more objective look at my family. They were no longer a resource for me to grow. They were a part of my past that I needed to overcome. One day, I received an appointment from my grandfather. He was the only person in my family that I always felt respected and understood. He always stood up for me when no one else did. We had deep conversations about everything that had happened during that time. "Emma, you did very well. But do you think you have really completed the journey?" he asked me as we sat together. I looked at him, not answering right away. "I think I've gone further than this family expected. I've taken back the company. I've become a real leader, but I feel like I'm still missing something." He smiled, his eyes filled with wisdom. "You have won it all, but it is important for you to understand that winning is not always the end. Sometimes, true victory is accepting yourself and moving forward freely, no longer bound by the past." His words made me think. Yes, I had won, but I had not completely freed myself from the past. I had not completely freed myself from the old wounds, the pain that my family had left in me. And I realized that in order to be free, I had to forgive myself. After meeting with grandfather, I realized what I had to do next to continue my journey. I was no longer the person of the past, no longer the despised daughter. But I also could not live forever in that resentment and suffering. I decided that I would not only run Jennings Media successfully, but also build a legacy that I can be proud of. I will not just be a CEO, but someone who can change the way people look at family, at success, and at what I can actually achieve. The company will not only be my empire, but a symbol of rising up, of getting up after failures, of never giving up no matter what the world thinks of you. I'm ready for the next step, and I don't need anyone's approval to continue on this path.